It's February 2004, Panthers vs. Patriots in Super Bowl 38. This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and my guest is the Ringer's Steven Ruiz. We talked Panthers-Rams divisional last time we got together, Steve Smith's walk-off in double OT, now fast-forwarding 3 weeks to a thriller in Houston against Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots. In the present Super Bowl 60s rolling up, we get a Patriots-Seahawks rematch, but Steven, is Patriots-Panthers a more proper analog for LX?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think you have the element of two teams that weren't expected, or the Panthers weren't expected to be there. And then you have on one side an offense that I think has been built on old school philosophy in the Patriots, like getting under center, having fullbacks on the field, running the football, even if it's not the most efficient way of moving the football, especially for them. And then on the other side, you have a defensive genius. I think there's almost role reversal here, where Mike Macdonald's in the role of Bill Belichick and the Panthers are playing the role of the Patriots. It's a fascinating matchup. It was a fascinating matchup 22 years ago too, so I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, and we'll sprinkle in some of those parallels throughout this episode. 2025-26 has been the season of the shifting meta and a reminder of the NFL's cyclical nature in a lot of ways. Could you say this Panthers-Patriots Super Bowl from the 03 season showcases the early 2000s brand of Super Bowl winning football, but then also for spurts rips open a portal to the post-2004 game?
Yeah, because I do feel like we were in like a vacuum between the Broncos teams of the late 90s who were so dominant in that during that 2-year stretch. And then you had the Cowboys before them. And then you had the Patriots eventually take over. But in between, you had the Rams, you had the Ravens, you had the Bucks, you had this Panthers team kind of come out of nowhere. So I do think there was something to it, and I think realignment might have played a role in that. And you bring in an expansion team in the Texans, and you just had an expansion team in the Browns. I think there was a lot of shifting things in the league, and it took some time for the league to settle down after that. And we saw that with the Patriots kind of forcing the league's hand by just dominating for the next 20 years, I guess.
AFC and NFC titles in January 2004. Patriots famously stunt the Colts offense in wintry Foxborough, general managed by Bill Polian, who's on the rules committee that coming off season. Panthers also go to Philly that conference championship Sunday and glove the receivers, aggressive man defense, win 14-3, the 3 INT club for both Ty Law and rookie Ricky Manning Jr. that day. After 2 weeks of widespread discussion about whether the receivers are getting mugged, we'll see some ticky-tack calls in coverage early in the Super Bowl. How much did the offenses having a delayed liftoff in Super Bowl 38-02, that the teams getting a sense basically what kind of strike zone, so to speak, they're working with in game?
Yeah, I thought that was a big factor in the game, and I thought Phil Simms did a good job of talking about it at the beginning of the game, especially from the Panthers' perspective about them getting in the grill of Patriots receivers. I don't think the Patriots really countered with a similar game plan that they had against the Colts. I think Simms even mentioned they were talking about how the Patriots are known for this complex defense, and obviously they're coming off the heels of tricking Peyton Manning, fooling Peyton Manning, and getting aggressive with their receivers. And he was like, I don't think that's going to be the game plan. And I'm assuming that he was basing this off the production meetings where they talked to the coaches and the players. And he was like, I think it's going to be, they don't expect the Panthers to be having this robust drop back game, and they're not going to try to throw the ball all over the yard. They're going to get under center. They're going to run the football, and they're going to run play action. So there's no need for that complexity or even like that tight man coverage. So I thought it was, ironically, the Patriots, the team that kind of became the poster child for that aggressive man-to-man defense that Bill Polian eventually convinced the rules committee to get out of the game. That wasn't really their game plan in this one. And the Panthers, on the other hand, it very much was, especially if you watch, like you could see them from the very beginning. They're pressed up, playing a lot of man coverage against those Patriots receivers. And we saw that against the Eagles, of course.
Yeah, it seemed like early on Patriots were like, oh, Terry Cousin, aggressive man. All right, we can go with that. And they try a bunch, but through some weird circumstances, over 26 scoreless minutes to begin here in Houston, a Super Bowl record. Patriots-Seahawks came close, and another Bill Belichick involved slow start offensively to a Super Bowl. However, that belies the balance. A couple of Vinatieri misses. New England's up 103 total yards to 0 on Carolina, well into the second quarter. Then Vrabel in for the strip sack on Jake Delhomme, chops that long windup, which will set up Deion Branch wide open, middle of field play action, 7-0. Both those plays seem kind of easy. As a Panthers fan, were you just going to house money mode at this point mentally?
I think I was actually. I think I was in house money mode after the Rams game. I know we talked about this, how I thought they were cooked at the end, especially I think the Rams got a late onside kick, and I was like, all right, it's over now. And then the Eagles game, I felt like they didn't really have a chance because the Panthers, even though I was younger, like I still have the sense that they were kind of a fraud team. I think when you're younger, you're just kind of, you just buy into the hype of the team that you're watching, and you're like, oh, they're not overrated just because they're playing close games and they have an unsustainable record in close games. But I think towards the end of that season, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think there was a 3-game losing streak at the end of that season. And they kind of went from, a lock for the playoffs and to win the division to there being a little bit of a question mark. And I think they had to clinch it against like a bad Cardinals team at the end. So I didn't have super high expectations going into the playoffs, but then, they beat the Cowboys in the first game at home. The Rams game, the Rams felt like the best team in the NFC that year. And I think they felt like the best team in the NFL, at least from my perception. And once they beat them, then it was like a house money thing. Cause like that was such an exhilarating game. And you're always going to remember that game, no matter how the rest of the playoffs ended. But then going up against the Eagles, it felt like that was, they weren't the best team in the league that year, but I thought they were like the big bad villain in the NFC. That was the team, the gatekeepers. Literally, you had to go through them to get to the Super Bowl. So once they beat them, I think I started to get a little more hope, and I think it went away from the house money feeling. But I do remember distinctly, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, like after the Patriots won, I wasn't that bummed out about it. I remember that. And I was someone who took those losses very hard when I was younger. Like if the Panthers lost like a random week 5 game, it would just ruin my week. And I just remember not feeling like that after the game. So maybe I did have that feeling, although obviously the fourth quarter gave me a little bit of hope and optimism at the end there.
Yeah, 7-point underdogs in the Super Bowl and in that divisional against the Rams. Only 4-point dogs against the Eagles, much like 2026's Super Bowl. Some folks are mentioning, well, the quarterback was injured in the conference title. McNabb gets his ribs injured, plays through it against the Panthers. They only score 3 at home against that aggressive man defense. They couldn't. Todd Pinkston couldn't shake loose from the man coverage, but the Patriots have more success. Also, another similarity in that the Panthers' strength of schedule in 03, a lot of made of that. Pro Football Focus had them as a second easiest strength of schedule. So, some were mentioning that about the Patriots this year. But as Delhomme gets ready to go back out there, down 7-0 against the Patriots, Mike Vrabel they got in the strip sack on him last drive. He's 1 for 9 passing at about 0.1 yards per attempt at this point. We will again carousel through time back to Vrabel's rookie year in 97, where he ices the Patriots season with a strip sack in the divisional on behalf of the Pittsburgh Steelers, sends Pete Carroll and Drew Bledsoe home. And we also go forward to Vrabel facing the Seahawks in Super Bowl 60. As far as, let's say, streaky passers go, do you see a little Delhomme in Darnold?
Yeah, I do. I think my comp, because there is like Delhomme had a decent arm and he was able to throw on the move and he was able to throw off platform, which I think is something that Darnold really excels at. I think there is that style of play to him. I kind of comp him to Brock Purdy. Like I don't think he's as quick as Brock Purdy, but I do think he has that ability to escape and to scramble when he needs to and to pick up a first down. I don't know if we necessarily saw it in this game, but throughout the 2003 season, he did it a lot, and he did a lot throughout his career when he was in his prime before he really got hurt, slowed down. But yeah, I do think he's one of those quarterbacks where the range of outcomes is so wide. Like you can get like not an MVP performance, but although you did get that out of Purdy in 2023, but you can get that high level performance where he's throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, or you can get that performance where he looks like a backup. Like he looks like he throw for 120 yards. And I think we saw like both sides of that in this game. That first quarter and a half, like you said, he was averaging like 1 yard per drop back. He was, I think it was like minus 0.5 EPA per play. It was pretty brutal. I remember seeing like graphics in the second quarter. It was like the Panthers had negative 17 yards of total offense. So we saw both sides of it. But in that fourth quarter, the guy averaged 15 yards per dropback. Like he really turned it on after that strip sack. And I wonder if that is the thing that kind of, just calmed his nerves a little bit, because he did seem a little nervy. He was just throwing the ball up into double coverage when he was able to throw the ball downfield. When he wasn't, he was kind of scrambling around and getting sacked. So I think that knocked some sense into him, maybe.
Yeah, and Phil Simms was mentioning on the broadcast that Panthers offensive coordinator Dan Henning said, we don't even have an opening script. We let Jake go feel it out. Now Kyle Shanahan would never. But are we seeing also again that shifting meta? Are we seeing nowadays control move back toward the play caller and the coach from the quarterback?
Yeah. I think there's like competing thoughts. Like I've had this conversation the last couple of years, and I think it's a good way of like bucketing offenses and like approaches is like that player-centric approach, which I think you've seen with like Patrick Mahomes, for instance. Obviously, I think like Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, where these guys seem like coaches on the field and they're making all these changes. I think Josh Allen fit that in that bucket a couple years ago, but then you kind of seen the Bills rein him back since Joe Brady has taken over, and he's kind of become, he's not a game manager in terms of like skill set, like that's all he can do, but like the Bills kind of put him in that role. And I don't know if that was like a reaction to him turning the ball over a bunch, but we saw like competing theories in this game. Like I think we saw a team on one side with the Panthers who were trying to protect their quarterback and maybe not putting all that on his plate with the script and telling them like, here's the game plan and this is what we're trying to accomplish. Maybe that's part of it, but you could tell that they really wanted to put him in situations where he was only throwing on like 3rd and 4 early on. Like they wanted to run Stephen Davis, even if it was against a brick wall, and get at least 4 yards per carry. I think they quoted Davis, and he was like, if I don't get 4 yards, I feel like a failure, like on any given play. And I think that was the game plan for them. Whereas if you watch the Patriots, especially like the first opening drives, the first drive, I don't think they call a run, like a normal run, that whole drive. Like the first run they call is a draw play. And then they're calling screen passes. They're calling play action on first down. It was a real like modern approach to the game. And play calling and offensive play calling, all the stuff we talk about now, like the Patriots were doing that in 2003. And it was kind of jarring to watch them and then watch the Panthers just run for 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And then it's 3rd and long and they tell Delhomme, hey, go figure it out. So I don't think Henning's approach, maybe it worked for Delhomme, but I think it was a bad approach overall. And we kind of saw that at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, Patriots come out slinging it while the Panthers take their chances running into the brick wall known as, well, I guess it's known as a few guys. Ted Washington, yeah. Richard Seymour, of course, Vrabel, Brewski, Rodney Harrison flying in there, McGinnis.
Like, that was a game plan that was very much based on this is what we do and we're going to try to do it. It was not this is the opponent and we're going to try to beat the opponent, because you don't run into that front if that's what you're trying to do. And you don't run into that front without protection for the run game. Whereas you saw the Patriots, who were going up against the best defensive line in the NFL at the time, in my opinion. You had Julius Peppers, Chris Jenkins, who might have been the best player on the defensive line at that time. It was Julius Peppers' second year, I believe. Mike Rucker, and they had depth. Brenson Buckner, forgetting Sean Burton. I forget what his first name was. Yeah, I think he ended up blocking a kick in this one. Al Wallace. They had a deep rotation, and the Patriots game plan was very much built around slowing down that defensive line. with those draw plays, with those screen passes, with those play action passes. They were very mindful of what they were going up against. Whereas the Panthers, that game plan could have worked against any type of defense. It could have worked against they could have run it out against a Tony Dungy Tampa 2, and I don't think they would have changed anything about it. So I think you saw the difference in coaching staffs, especially on the offensive side of the ball in this game.
Yeah, and John Fox, again, that aggressive man coverage, got his first job working under, at least his first NFL job working under Tony Dungy and Chuck Noll in Pittsburgh during the 80s. But Patriots are finding ways to get the receivers open, moving the ball. Vinatieri is missing a couple like short kicks, one of them tipped, and then they score a touchdown. So huge Patriots advantage. The Panthers have their backs against the ropes of their own end zone, and Jake Delhomme hits Ricky Prohl on 3rd and long. We are cruising toward positive team passing yards now, and maybe the Panthers get some points on the board late in the first half. Doesn't get more Y2K than deep in the playoffs with Ricky Prohl. And the second half, we'll hear from Jermaine Wiggins. Marty Herney, new Y2K ball. What do you think of the job Dan Morgan, who's a linebacker that also cut another Patriots drive short this game? Morgan has done as GM of the Panthers in the 2020s.
I mean, I think he's done a very good job considering what he walked into after Scott Fitterer left. I've always been a fan of Dan Morgan. It was one of the first Panthers jerseys I ever owned. I used to wear that thing out too at every game they played. One of my favorite players, one of my favorite early players. I think he had like 20 tackles in this game, and he had like something like 19 tackles. It was like 40 tackles total between the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. Just an amazing linebacker for me. You kind of saw him get exposed in coverage a couple times, especially on the play action. The first touchdown, I think it was. I'm not recalling, but I remember he bit on a play action. There was a guy wide open down the middle. So that was kind of on him. They were in a cover 2 defense. So that middle linebacker is really important, and he kind of botched that. But other than that, the guy was all over the field, physical, making stops on 3rd down, tackling guys short. It was kind of jarring after watching the 2025 season and going back and watching this, how automatic the decision was whenever a team got stopped short on 4th and 2, 4th and 1. The punt team just came running on, and there was no discussion from the commentators. I think one of those teams, it ended up being a close game. Obviously, the Patriots won. I think the Patriots could have really blown this out if they kept their offense on the field on 4th and short. And I think the Panthers would have had a much better chance early on of scoring if they had been more ambitious on 4th down. But I thought that was the key to the game, was like these defenses were really just trying to survive 3rd down, get it to 3rd down, and then make a tackle short of the sticks. And for the first half, the strategy worked brilliantly because none of these coaches wanted to go for it on 4th.
Yeah, Patriots very well could have broken it open early. I wonder if they got spooked. Dan Morgan crashes right down, as you mentioned, on the handoff. They have Richard Seymour and Mike Vrabel in the backfield for that one. Dan Morgan's like, they're not going to pass it, I bet. Bookmark that for later. But if you take the 4 quarterbacks in Super Bowls 38 and 60, and Delhomme's going to, like Darnold is going to go on some streaky passing here after a tough start. But May, Darnold, Brady, and Delhomme, none of them count even 5% against the team's cap spending for that season. Way wilder nowadays when under 15% is a bit of relief, at least for the preseason contenders. Now we got Seattle, New England, 60-1 coming in. Same number you could get the Panthers summer 03. That's also how far back you have to go to find Super Bowl participants who didn't even make the bracket the previous year. A couple more Super Bowls in that mini era. Super Bowl stats. 2000 to 2003 saw 3 of the 6 times we had missing the playoffs to both teams going to the Super Bowl next season. Rams, Titans, Giants, Ravens with that distinction. That span also 2000 to 2003, those Super Bowls, 3 of the top 5 defenses all time, points per game. Do you think these things are connected in that post Y2K era, or could the dramatic upward and downward mobility of teams at this time be attributed to other things? I touched on a little bit earlier, but how much is it just like the defenses at this time.
I mean, I think that's part of it. I think the rules definitely played into it. I think the post salary cap era where it was kind of harder to establish yourself as a dominant team just because teams were still learning how to maintain roster success. And then this was before the 2011 CBA, obviously, when rookie contracts became a thing, a valuable thing. Like it used to be a burden to have a rookie quarterback that was drafted in the top 10 because you had to pay the guy like 20 million, or not 20 million, but give him like a $25 million contract, which was a lot of money at the time. Now it's a yearly salary. So I think teams were really trying to figure out how to sustain success, and I don't even know if like building around the quarterback was like as big of a thing as it is now. I feel like now we're so quarterback centric in how we view the game, but back then there was the idea that you could have a franchise running back, which is just kind of insane at this point. So I think teams are still trying to figure out roster construction and really nailing it down for the long term. Like I think that's evidenced by the fact that the Broncos were seen as like some powerhouse just because they were, they went to the Super Bowl 2 years in a row. We didn't really have those long sustained models of success after the kind of the 90s, the 80s. 49ers kind of died out in the middle of the decade when Steve Young retired. And then the Cowboys obviously fell apart at the latter half of the 90s. So I don't think we really had those dominant teams at the top like we now have, where you can kind of, this year notwithstanding, but you can kind of set your watch to the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens being contenders on one side, the Eagles being contender on the other side, and then someone out of the NFC West, usually the Rams or the 49ers. We didn't really have that back then. I don't feel like. So I feel like there was a lot of room for that upward mobility and even downward mobility. So we saw more wild swings. I think that was like the height of NFL parity in my mind. Maybe I was just younger, and it's one of those things where like the thing you remember when you were younger is the thing, like that's when it was at its best. But I do think it felt like more so than even this year, even though we got two teams that kind of came out of nowhere, that you could go from worst to first and compete for a championship.
Yeah, the 2000s, when you're averaging close to just one quarterback drafted top 15 per year. Aaron Rodgers, the second QB taken at pick 24, while three running backs went top 5 in 05. Brady, 6th-rounder. Even though he inked his extension by 03, he was still counting less than half against the cap that year. The QB salaries, rookie salaries, things you mentioned. Brady less than half against the cap than the Browns were allocating to Tim Couch in 2003. Some things never change. Panthers went into 03 signing Delhomme from another team across the NFC. Seahawks in the 2025 offseason. That's kind of a flyer, kind of a prove-it deal structurally for Darnold. Good headline number, but do you buy there's a shifting also, again, meta toward the QB investment and management of yesteryear? It'll never go back to the early 2000s, but do you think that even the QB cap investment and skepticism about contracts could be pulling back from the peak in maybe the late 2010s, early 2020s?
Yeah, I do think I think that's interesting because I think if you look back at 2023 in this particular matchup of quarterbacks, and I hadn't thought about this until you just said it, those two teams kind of stumbled into the rookie contract type deal and how it affects their salary cap, but not doing it in the ways that you could do it now, where you could just draft a guy like Cam Ward is a benefit to your salary cap, even though he's the first overall pick. Back then, if you drafted a guy, like I said earlier, and he was the first overall pick, you had to pay him a ton of money and give him a ton of guarantees. But the Patriots found a quarterback in the 6th round who was still kind of making 6th round money by the time this game was played. The Panthers didn't sign Delhomme as a starter; they signed him as a backup. Rodney Peete was the starter in week 1, and they pulled him down 17-0 against the Jaguars. Delhomme leads the comeback, and then they never really look back. So you kind of stumbled on these cheaper quarterback options who ended up being, like, obviously Brady, I think by this point was a top 10 quarterback. You could debate whether he was the first year they won the Super Bowl. Delhomme was not a top 10 quarterback, but he was on the fringe of like being a Pro Bowler back when the Pro Bowl meant something and Shedeur Sanders wasn't making it, and Tyler Huntley and Mitch Trubisky. But he was always on that fringe, and maybe I'm overrating him because I was a Panthers fan, but I felt like he was like in that 13 to 15 range where, in their good years, they could perform like a top 10 quarterback. In their bad years, it's closer to 20. I feel like he was that. And if you're getting that for what they were paying, like that's a bargain back then when quarterback play was either you drafted him or you had an established star and you were paying him a bunch of money. Either way, you're giving the quarterback a bunch of money. So I do think that the Delhomme Brady thing was a forerunner to what we saw in the post 2011 CBA world. But I do think you're right. I think teams are looking for other ways, and maybe it's the reclamation project thing that's been going on the last couple of years, where we've seen a Geno Smith kind of be reclaimed. We've seen Baker Mayfield be reclaimed. We've seen Darnold, obviously, Daniel Jones. So I think with the NFL, we call it a copycat league. I think teams need to see proof of concept before they can buy in on a thing. And I think we've gotten that proof of concept that you don't have to build around a top 5 pick, top 10 pick at quarterback, or one of these like elite guys. Like, you can build a pretty decent team around good quarterback play, even if you are paying, what is Darnold making, like $30 million a year? That's not like, no one thought that was a bargain before the season. You know what I mean? So I do think that there is a shifting change. But it is interesting looking back, like why Delhomme and Brady were such advantages for their teams and how they could build around them.
Yeah, and Patriots just sit at 3. They don't trade up, and they get their guy. Seahawks, it's a pretty team-friendly deal for them. It's somehow less than 5% of their cap spending, the way it's structured, and they basically have a void after the season. And now those teams can pay a bit of a premium for that extra piece without mortgaging the future. You can go get Stephon Diggs, Rodney Harrison, Steven Davis, Kupp and Lawrence for Seattle. Dare me to hit Milton Williams, 200-1 Super Bowl MVP. But the most talked about free agency wave the Patriots made, let's go back a little bit, was cutting Milloy 5 days before the season started. If, say, you were just surfing Pro Football Reference without a ton of prior context, is what transpires in 2003 the strangest week 1 box score of the 21st century?
It's up there. I think you could argue this last year with the Patriots losing to the Raiders, who ended up being just an awful, awful team. And if you watch that game, like, the Raiders were in control. It wasn't like a nail biter either. Like, it seemed like the Raiders were up 2 scores. The Patriots could bring it back to 1 score, but they never really challenged them. It was like whistle to whistle domination by the Raiders, who were, I still can't even explain what went wrong there. The Patriots go on this run afterwards, or a month later. But I remember that game and thinking, oh, this is like the Patriots. They had missed the playoffs the year before, I believe, even though they had a decent record. The Patriots were easy to. This was only their second Super Bowl win against the Panthers, but they were already easy to root against. I do remember that, just coming off the Tuck rule and everything, even though they didn't seem like a dynasty at the time because they won the 1 Super Bowl, missed the playoffs the next year. They were good this year, but it wasn't like obvious they were going to march to the Super Bowl. But yeah, that week 1 game, I remember just thinking it was like the first of many. Is the Patriots dynasty done yet? That might have been the first one, and the answer was obviously no. I think they lost 31-0 or something like that.
And they beat the Bills 31-0 week 17. Milloy goes to the Bills because we're playing them this weekend. He and Drew Bledsoe, even Sam Adams, whose father was an offensive lineman for the Patriots, gets a pick 6 on Tom Brady. I'm not sure if it's a segment or a show. It could probably easily be either. But one where people they come upon strange Pro Football Reference box scores. It could be called something like, I don't know, what on earth? And then you try to figure out exactly what happened through the context. Tom Jackson, the consummate Bronco, says the players hate Belichick and the season hangs in the balance. If you wanted to galvanize this team, great job. Pats recover, Super Bowl odds. Yeah, you mentioned coming in. They're not one of the top 7 teams. They're down at 15-1. And after the 1-2 start and people sleeping on them, 13 straight through to the AFC title. You mentioned Peyton Manning, and they also torched the Peyton Manning, they torched the 1 seed Chiefs, no punts. The Bucs, the defending Super Bowl champs, not even in the playoffs. Colts announcing the mid-2000s shift to the offensive meta, but in Foxborough, in the elements, Patriots say, nah, not yet. And we got to hold that for specifically the second and fourth quarters of the Super Bowl when it's all going to explode. 61 points will be scored in just those 2 quarters. For the Panthers, that starts with Steve Smith stacking Tyrone Poole. How did the Panthers finally get this game off to the races offensively?
Yeah, it was the deep ball. Really, it was those vertical routes. Like they weren't all like totally deep, but even like the throw at the end. I'm jumping ahead again to Pro. Wasn't it like a deep ball, but it was a vertical route against blitz. But yeah, I think they just realized. I think they stopped trying to run as much as they were early on. I think they did realize that if we're going to win this game, we got to attack these guys on the perimeter where we have our biggest advantage. We don't have an advantage in the trenches. We do have an advantage with Muhammad, and we have Ricky Prohl. We have Steve Smith. I was kind of surprised, and I guess I wasn't paying attention at the time at how much Muhammad was used in the slot, actually. And then you had Prohl, who seems like a slot guy just because he's white, and then Smith, who seems like a slot guy because he's small. But those guys were kind of playing on the outside, and Muhammad was being moved around and playing in the slot a bunch. And I just think that's where they had the advantage. And like Tyrone Poole was getting stiff-armed by Steve Smith. It wasn't Ty Law's best game. He didn't really make a lot of plays. So I think the Panthers finally found an advantage that they had and just started, tapping at it and poking at it until it finally broke. And that was really what they were able to do, is big plays. It wasn't sustained drives. It wasn't like Delhomme locked in and became more accurate. I think he ended the game with like a success rate in the 30s, but he averaged 10 yards per drop back. And like even in the fourth quarter, when he averaged 15 yards per drop back, the success rate wasn't terribly high. So this was very much a screw it. Let's just bomb it out there. We have the advantage. We have good wide receivers. I don't think people realized how good Steve Smith was at the time because he was a return guy the first couple of years. This year was his first like real breakout year as a wide receiver. And I think he only had like 800 yards. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. But he had a big play against the Cowboys on the first play in the wild card game. I remember that. And he got caught from behind, which I still don't understand how that happened. He obviously had the walk-off play against the Rams. Didn't really do much against the Eagles because nobody did much against the Eagles. But this is the game where I think he was established as a real star. And we didn't really see that until 2005 because he gets hurt in the very first game of 2004, breaks his leg. You kind of saw it in that 2004 game. It was against the Packers on Monday night. And he had a decent game, if I remember correctly. He breaks his leg at the end. We don't see him until 2005. He comes out in 2005, and he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. But we saw the beginnings of that. He made a couple of crazy catches in this game. He made a catch down the sideline on like a scramble drill, or a couple of crazy plays, I should say. The stiff arm I mentioned before was like a staple in like those NFL films, like Spikes to Commercial, like when they like show like the Raiders guy running and looking at the camera from like the 70s Super Bowl and like all the memorable stuff like that. That stiff arm like is burnt like into my brain. But I think this was like the breakout game for him. And then obviously Muhammad had the big reception, which I believe at the time was the longest play in Super Bowl history. So I think how they got back into the game was, okay, our best players on the offense are Steve Smith and Muhsin Muhammad. Let's get them to the ball and let's get them the ball downfield.
Yeah, and they have cameras on them, hamming it up on the sideline. Steve Smith mimes holding a mic to Muhsin Muhammad. Please let the world know how physical they are. Talking about the Patriots cornerbacks. And then Muhsin, well, they've been physical to Marvin Harrison and the little guy, but they don't want none of this. I'm guessing little man was supposed to be Brandon Stokely, who had a good postseason, but in Foxborough, they shut it down. But the Panthers offense gets going late in the first half. Patriots, however, answer right back. You mentioned they're working them with the play action. They'd had some success with Antoine Smith running the ball, 13 rushes at the break, yielding another wide open TD over the middle, this time to David Givens, the first time to Deion Branch. Offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss, you mentioned the tall task with that defensive line. And to combat this, I kind of got vibes of like Brady in later years against like, I don't know, the Chargers defense in 2018 and Rams in 2018 was supposed to be overmatched. Did you see some staples in this game that would stay with Brady post-Weiss?
Yeah, I definitely do. Especially with like the tight man coverage, you saw some of the option routes out of the slot. I think they had a lot of success with that. The play action passing game, that was something they really started hammering, especially like the second half of the 2010s. the 2018 team in particular, like down the stretch, really started getting under center, running play action because they couldn't really protect Brady otherwise. So I do think this was kind of like a preview. For me, this was the game where Brady was like, I am a star. Like, I'm not a guy who is riding a great defense, because that was very much how they won back then. That was the formula. It was great defense, smart play from the quarterback, not turning the ball over. It's kind of like the Eagles formula, but in a different way. Obviously, you have different quarterbacks. But in this game, he carried this offense. Like, I don't know what would have happened if he didn't play as efficiently in the drop back passing game as he did down the stretch, and he wasn't able to find those openings. I remember at the beginning of the game, Phil Simms kind of quoted Tom Brady saying this was the most complex defense he had ever seen in his NFL career to that point. And I remember like thinking about John Fox. I was like, I don't really remember him like being this like, schemer guy. But then I'm watching the game and they're running like modern defense. Like, they're running. We're going to get to the interception, but there's a play before that that's kind of like the Patriots run the same exact play, but the Panthers are running like match quarters concepts. They're playing like man match and they're passing routes off. So I think Brady had a hard time at the beginning kind of figuring out where his options were. But once he got into it and got a rhythm, it felt like a ball didn't hit the ground. It really did. It felt like every time he dropped back, there was going to be an open receiver and he was going to hit him 7 yards downfield and get a chunk of yards. So I really got to give props to Brady in that game. I don't remember at the time him being as good as he was, but watching it back, I was like, yeah, this was vintage Tom Brady. This wasn't that. I watched the Rams Patriots game because I'm ranking the top 50 quarterback performances of the century. So I went back and watched that game, and two totally different quarterbacks and styles of offense.
Yeah, just another testament to Brady, because John Fox and Mike Turkovac were cooking in 03. And Belichick's fellow New York Giant, Phil Simms, we get some early nuggets. You mentioned the one establishing the run at the young, still developing Julius Peppers. Phil Simms in the Kentucky Pro Football Hall of Fame. Bill Belichick being taught some sort of lesson by the other Pro Football Hall of Fame. Sure, Vrabel's doing a great job with the Patriots post-Belichick, but you know who didn't? Troy Brown, Super Bowl Media Week. Have you gotten up on this? The NFL Game Day 2004 game before the game. They used to predict every Super Bowl winner, eight in a row. Brown was cooked defensively by Steve Smith on the other PS2 controller. As you can imagine, the swagger, Steve Smith ices the game by throwing to himself. Even with how rocky that first half had been, you're down 14-7 with like less than 20 seconds left in the half. Patriots just went down for another easy score. Did Steve Smith give you, as a young fan, belief?
Yeah. The first time he ever touched the ball as a Panther, he scored a touchdown. The Vikings game, 2001, 2001, he takes the opening kickoff week 1 all the way back. They win that game. They don't win another game for the rest of the season. But Steve Smith was the lone bright spot from that season. And it was very much as like a returner, but that you saw the flashes of him being a big play receiver when he did get his chances. And he was like instantly one of my favorite Panthers. Like within a week, he was of being a Panther. He was already one of my favorites. So I already knew what he could do. And I just assumed that like he's a big play waiting to happen. And if we're only down by 7 points, then we're always in the game with him. I think he made me look smart a couple years later when he basically dragged the team to the NFC Championship game by himself. But that whole year, and you mentioned this, like the cardiac cats, that whole thing, I think they showed a graphic where Delhomme had 8 game-winning drives throughout the season. You never felt out of a game, like never. Even I'm going back to week 2, I think it was. They played the Bucks. Keenan McCardell catches a ball in the back of the end zone, final seconds, and it might have been 0 seconds on the clock. And the Panthers were up 6, so that tied the game, extra point. And the Panthers blocked the extra point, and I think they go into overtime and win it. Like when you see that happen, especially when you're young, you're like, oh, this team can overcome anything. They blocked an extra point back when it was like 2 yards away. That was crazy. And they had so many wins like that throughout the season where like the Patriots would have had to go up 14 points for me to feel like the game was over. And they were never able to do that. Thankfully, Tom Brady threw us a gift in the red zone.
Yeah, we got a little teaser for the second half And we'll see if the NFL game day prediction streak continues. The line makers were unenthused. Pat stay at 7. Smitty was ripping off 70-yard Steven Davis runs pretty much every play. So I guess that wasn't predictive. Uh,
No.
Davis does spring a 21-yarder right before the half. Casey field goal, 14-10. So that game day streak could be live. If they pull this out like Edgar Bennett did against Terry Glenn in 1997 on the PS1, we will not drop to 8-1, killing the streak, and NFL Game Day will not be shuttered after the very next release. A lot of pressure on the Panthers' shoulders. NFL Game Day streak, it's all for you. Which segue is the name of the first track Janet Jackson rolls out on the halftime show. All for You, my take, good pop song. The program actually begins with a 2004 Get Out the Vote package, Choose or Lose, they call it, and then they cut to Reliant Stadium. Jessica Simpson saying, choose to party, Houston. There's some music. I think Justin Timberlake shows up later. Did you catch any of the show?
I do remember the halftime show. I don't remember the infamous moment on the halftime show, but I do have to give credit to my brother, because my brother, like the halftime show ended and my brother was like, wait, did that just happen? And then we were able to, we had like the DVR at the time. I forget, it might've been TiVo at the time. And I remember rewinding, we were like, oh, holy crap, that did happen. That was, yeah. I think Britney Spears might've been involved in that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm conflating halftime.
Oh, she was 2000. She was a Ravens Giants halftime.
That's what it
with
was.
Aerosmith.
That's what I remember. I'm conflating all these, but I do remember the halftime show. I remember Janet Jackson coming out, and I remember my brother catching that when I had no idea. I wasn't obviously looking for wardrobe malfunctions at the time. I was fretting over what was going to happen in the second half.
Yeah, there may have been a ring attached to a part of a body part. That the program came from MTV and CBS under Viacom. Both were sister companies along with Paramount. There would be FCC fines, but no threatening of government issued licenses over how pliant they are. That would be more Mussolini's way of doing business. Let's cruise through the third quarter. No points or turnovers. We do get a couple Jermaine Wiggins catches. We also get Vinatieri, probably nerves. Wiggins, Vinatieri, the heroes of that snow game, the Tuck Rule game. But Vinatieri's missed 240 yards and had the bad squib that led to the field goal right before the half. So that's 9 points on Vinatieri. They're only up 4, and they're struggling to put them away. Antoine Smith, at the B-gap Pepper side, touchdown. But the Panthers keep coming back. Pepper's, recent UNC basketball player, so he'll get real good real quick, still developing. This will be a refrain. Carolina responds down 21-10. And Smith, Muhammad, Delhomme glide right down the field. Then Deshaun Foster's touchdown run. It looked like rookie safety Eugene Wilson tried to hit stick him. The feature that Madden would release that year, it looks kind of goofy when you missed. Did you dig that feature ad?
Yeah, that was like my heyday of Madden. Like that was the golden age of Madden. Those 2 years when the first year, I think Ray Lewis was on the cover of it. It was one of the video games I played the most in my life. And then the year after was Donovan McNabb with the vision cone, which I think is the most underrated advancement in a football game ever. And I'm still mad they took it away. I think they should add it back. But yeah, that was the golden age. And the hit stick, I remember it wasn't just the hit stick. It was like they allowed you to do like defensive hot routes and audibles for the first time. So it was like a very defensive minded game. And I think this was like a forerunner for that, because we had the Panthers defense, which was so good throughout the season. You had the Patriots defense, which just took down the best offense in the NFL. And then you had the Eagles defense. You had all these great defenses, as you mentioned. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think that's why I'm more inclined to, I feel like I'm more of a defensive minded kind of guy. Like if I was a coach, I think I would want to coach on the defensive side. And I think it's because I came up in this era of great defenses. And then obviously the Madden game put so much emphasis on it.
Yeah. And, pretty good defense. Also some missed opportunities on offense in the third quarter. No scoring, fourth quarter, boots back up. We're suddenly 21-16 with some probably poor defense from rookie safety Eugene Wilson there. But Foster, it was kind of an open field tackle, kind of muddled. What'd you see that helped the Panthers spring the change of pace running back for the long touchdown run?
I mean, I think that's just what it was. I think they had Foster in there who was a change of pace guy, and he was a change of pace guy, but he could run physically, and you kind of saw it on this play when he's running through, like he runs through contact. And then the play that I'll always remember from Deshaun Foster is the play the week before against the Eagles. It's like a 3-yard touchdown run, but he runs through like legitimately like 5 guys and just doesn't go down. I think he was, and it's one of those things. I think back then you always thought like the backup, and it still happens today. I remember like Tony Pollard behind Zeke Elliott, where like the backup always has those better numbers because they get to run in situations where you're not expecting to run. And Deshaun Foster was definitely that guy for me. Like I was like, this guy, he's better than Steven Davis. He's more exciting. I think he was a rookie that year. He's young. He can make plays like that. He can make guys miss in the open field. He can still do some of that stuff. But that was just a great individual effort. I don't think it was like a great play call whatsoever. Like even before eluding the hit stick attempt, he had to make a shifty move at the line of scrimmage just to get out into the open field. So I'm going back to it. Like Dan Henning didn't do much to help his players in this game. I think like the Panthers sticking in, it was so much about their just raw physical talent from these young guys, including Steve Smith.
Yeah, I mean, and Steven Davis did have an awesome year. They set the Panthers record for rushing, but being that the change of pace back has its benefits situationally. And Deshaun Foster really came on this postseason. Another guy, not as big of a name coming in, but made some big plays here, would be, down 21-16, Panthers go for 2, miss it. Patriots right back down, looking to make it 2-score lead again. Al Wallace getting in Tom Brady's face, low interception of the game, right to Reggie Howard. What do you think Brady was seeing there?
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier, but first of all, shout out to Al Wallace, who I believe was like a vice principal like the year before. I remember that being a storyline throughout, but he's like a very productive player. And I think he might have blocked a kick or 2 throughout the season, because that was a big thing with them throughout the year, was the Panthers would block field goals. I think they blocked like 4 throughout the year. So like Vinatieri getting blocked early on, I wasn't surprised at all. But the Patriots had ran that same exact play from a different formation or with different personnel and different motion, where you have 2 under routes from the outside, and then you have the third guy inside running a corner route. The first time it was David Givens, who catches the ball on like the sideline, but I guess they ruled, I didn't see the replay, but I guess they ruled he was out of bounds, even though on live viewing it looked like he was inbounds. So the Patriots go back to that play. So what had happened was like the safety who ended up, the safety had bit on one of the underneath routes. So Givens' corner route was left wide open in the corner. So I'm assuming Weiss and Brady were like, okay, that was open. Let's go back to it later. We're going to have it. The Panthers were ready for it this time. They passed the routes off. The safety is able to go over the top of it. Brady gets hit, and then the cornerback is able to sink under it, and Howard gets the easy pick. So I think it was a combination of things. I think it was just like the Panthers had adjusted. The Patriots thought they wouldn't adjust for some reason. I don't know why they thought that would work. They did run it from a different formation with different motion, so maybe they thought they wouldn't see it coming. But it was a good adjustment by them. And Brady, I know he got contact and kind of got hit and just threw it up, but I think he was screwed either way if that was the window he was going to target, because they were all over it. If the quarterback doesn't pick it, I think the safety is in good position to take it.
Yeah, and in quick succession, Panthers with 2 long touchdowns sandwiching that Brady interception. I saw a win probability chart having the beginning of that span, the fourth quarter of Patriots about 80%. It comes crashing down to right about 50-50, still slight Patriots edge after Delhomme to, as you mentioned, Muhsin Muhammad for 85 yards, and tough stretch for Eugene Wilson again, gets a stiff arm from Muhammad at the end of that. Carolina goes for 2 again, incomplete to another famous post Y2K figure, Kevin Dyson, 1 yard short, 2-point failed, and the Music City Miracle. So not bad, but he's involved in a lot of stuff in that era. That game was actually, that Music City Miracle was a week after the computers didn't fail. I would say that what post Y2K era goes from here to the fallout from this Super Bowl halftime show inspires a guy to invent YouTube. You also might lump in this game because we're still rolling up to the 5-year anniversary of The Matrix hitting theaters. And at CBS, they seem pretty inspired. They have this something called CBS Vision. I think it looked most conspicuous on the Deshaun Watson touchdown run, where the instant replay virtually pulls the camera around in what seems unmistakably to mimic Matrix scenes. Do we like it or not? And are there any 2000s NFL broadcast flourishes we can't get over in some way?
No, I did like it, I think. And they had done it. When did the Matrix come out? Did the Matrix come out in 97, 99?
It was March 99.
99. So they had, I mentioned earlier, I was watching the Super Bowl. I watched the Ravens Giants Super Bowl the other day, and they had it in that one too. So I was kind of surprised that they had rolled it out before. I guess it's just a Super Bowl only feature. But I think it looked good. I think at sometimes they kind of negated the purpose of a replay. Like sometimes you couldn't really figure out the context of the play because they were shifting so much. And you were like, come on, just leave it on one replay so we could see it. So I think the idea was good. I think you're right about the Matrix influence. It definitely was influenced by that. Good idea. I don't know if it was like great in execution. That was around the time we got the first down line. I think we got the first down line in the late 90s, which is the best invention in the history of football broadcasting, outside of like putting the score on the screen at all times. I don't know if you remember, like when Fox was like, I think the first channel to do that. But if you were watching a game on like NBC, this was before CBS got the contract, they just like wouldn't show the score. like they would flash it up on the screen every once in a while. So if you're like tuning into a game, you're like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know the down. I don't know the distance. I don't know the score. I don't know how much time's left. So those were some features that I think were my favorites, I would say.
Yeah, and you could tell they're really excited to use that CBS Vision, but the situation's like, I don't know what extra that gave me, but watching the game back, I had fun seeing that. And we already talked about that Muhsin Muhammad 85-yard touchdown to give them a lead. They missed the 2 again. Win probability right about 50-50 when Patriots get the ball back and let David Givens go to work outside the hashes against Ricky Manning Jr., hero at the link for his physical cornerback play. But Givens gave a little back against these corners that come from John Fox, who learned from Dungy and Chuck Noll. Refs pocketed the flags here. I'm a fourth quarter fine with that kind of guy. Brady to Givens for 25. Then big third down, Jim. Givens for 18, giving us Mac Hollins vibes. Though Nance was on the desk with Deion Sanders for that Super Bowl. Greg Gumbel on play-by-play. Deion Sanders, not the kind of dual threat the Patriots have. They do have Mike Vrabel, who's trailing defensive end, collides with Julius Peppers, touchdown. How'd they get another freebie?
Yeah, I do think the Panthers defense wasn't ready for some reason. I think the Panthers defense defended the Patriots like they were going up against themselves. Like the constraint plays, the play action and all that stuff, like it really worked. I know like bringing on the defensive guys didn't work for the fourth down play, that good stuff, but the game plan was excellent. I think that was the difference in this game, was the offensive game plan was trained on attacking the team they were playing in front of them. And they were able to do it with certain runs that they knew the linebackers would have to respect and have to step up and to be able to carry out their run fits and their run responsibilities. And that's what it was to me. I don't think this was like, obviously nobody is celebrating these receivers like David Givens. Deion Branch had his moment in the sun eventually and got paid by Seattle, but these weren't like great receivers. And yet when you watch this game back, as you mentioned, like they're open most of the game. Like I've seen people kind of defend or, kind of prop up Brady, like, look what he was winning with. He's winning with these receivers. But those guys were open. They were getting open. And even Vrabel got open when he scored. But it was just great game planning to me. And it was just attacking the strength of the Panthers, which is something Belichick was so good at. And I don't know how much credit to give to him or to Charlie Weiss, but it just seemed like that was a common theme with all these wins was they didn't just like take away the strength. That was always the thing with Belichick, but they like sometimes they exploited it and attacked it to their benefit. And I think that was the case here. The defensive line, I think you can make the argument, ended up being a weakness for the Panthers just because of how the Patriots approached the game. And you saw it in all these situations where they were able to get chunks or get big plays off play action.
Yeah, and so Panthers go from up 22-21 to down 29-22 because Patriots get the 2 on the fake wild snap.
That's a staple. That's a staple that was carried over to the next era of the Patriots dynasty. The Patriots scored, I think it was a 2-point conversion against the Falcons in the comeback game on the same play. The fake, Brady pretends like it's a wild snap and it's a direct snap. And then this weekend against the Broncos, Josh McDaniels, I think he was like feeling himself going back to the lore. They run the same play. I don't know if you remember this on the goal line. I don't think it was a 2-point conversion, and it totally gets stuffed by the Broncos, and they were ready for it. But that was a nice little callback by Josh McDaniels. It didn't work, but it was. I wonder how many Patriots fans noticed the nod to Kevin Falk, and I forget who the other. I think it was James White. Might have been James White in the Super Bowl.
Getting me nostalgic, and it got the Patriots tied up, or actually no, not tied up, in a position where they could be tied up if the Panthers were to put up 7 on the next drive, and they do that in 90 seconds. Kind of crazy. And it ends with, as you mentioned earlier, the throw to Ricky Proehl, hand in Delhomme's face, drifting back on the money. Proehl has a few steps on Asante Samuel. I'm not sure whose coverage responsibility that was. Rodney Harrison had just exited with a broken arm. Do you think that had anything to do with why that looked so smooth and easy on that one?
I don't know if there was supposed to be safety help there, but it certainly seemed like Samuel was expecting some type of help on the inside, and that definitely didn't happen. Maybe it was just, young Samuel doing what he did best or later in his career, trying to rob a play and get a pick. Maybe that's what they kind of capitalized on. But it's very funny that Ricky Proehl scored that touchdown because it was a theme of the early 2000s was Ricky Proehl caps off a comeback against the Patriots only to get their hearts ripped out by Vinatieri and Brady right after, because it happened in the Rams game too.
Yeah, and Proehl also the game-winning touchdown against the Bucks in that NFC title January 2000. You don't hear from much during the season. Not a ton of moments, but the moments ain't too big. And so we have 29-29. Of course, nowadays we look back, it feels inevitable watching this, but at the time they'd only had 1 Super Bowl under their belt. Did it feel inevitable to you when Brady got the ball back with under a minute left?
I don't think he did once he got when he was trotting out on the field. Like obviously John Casey kicks the ball out of bounds, and I'm just beside myself. But during the drive, it felt inevitable. I don't know what it was, like the first completion or whatever it was. It was like, oh my God, there's someone open every play, and he's finding them every time. And like the play that kind of clinched the game, honestly, was a pretty good defensive play. Panthers are playing like a form of cover 2 man. It could be man match quarters type of deal where you're playing underneath and then the safeties are kind of in a zone, but they're helping out. They're either like doubling the slot, or if they stay short, they help out on the outside guy. And you can see the slot corner on Givens. Givens runs like an outbreaking route, kind of intermediate area, 15 yards. And you can see the cornerback on him is playing inside because he knows he has that safety help. They're kind of bracketing him high, low, and inside, outside. And Mike Minter gets there right at the catch point and gets a really good hit on him, hits him to the ground. I think Minter looks up, like looking to see if the ball got jarred loose. But Gibbons holds on to it, and that was the play that kind of put it away. But even up until that, it just felt like Brady was finding the guys. I did like when he tried on the field, I thought the Panthers were going to get a stop. We're going to go to overtime. But after 2 plays, I was like, okay, I see how this is going. But I will say this. When Vinatieri comes on, I thought with all my heart that they were going to block the kick. I really did. Just based on how the season had gone, they had blocked a kick earlier. He had missed the one kick. They had blocked kicks throughout the season. They had the block kick against Tampa Bay that I had referenced in week 2, which was their like big gate where it was like, oh, this is a team, because the Bucs were just fresh off the Super Bowl. So it's like, this is the team in the NFC South to beat. They just beat them on the road. So I was less worried about Vinatieri than I was about Brady, which kind of doesn't make sense because I think it was a 41-yard kick. And he put it right down the middle. So